The next step is to mount the Z motors. So what you'll need is the two Z stepper motors. The one has the 400mm cable, the other one the 800mm cable, 8 M3 by 10 screws, 8 M3 washers, and then the frame that the big frame that you've assembled up to now. To assemble the stepper motors, first we'll take the motor with a shorter motor, the shorter cable, the one with the 400mm cable, and we'll insert it from the bottom into the big frame. Make sure that the cables are exiting the motors is facing to the back, and then we'll fix the motor from the top with the screws and the washers. The same process will be followed for the other motor on the left hand side of the frame. When you're done with that, the assembly should look something like this. The next step is to mount the Y motor. That's the 48mm motor with the 500mm long cables. So what you'll need is the Y motor, 4 M3 by 10 screws, 4 M3 washers, and one of the GT2 pulleys. To mount the motor, we will place it in position. This is where it mounts onto the frame. So we'll make sure that the cables is exiting the motor to the back. We'll place the motor in position, and we'll secure the motor from this side with the 4 screws with the washers. Once you've tightened it, it should look like this. Make sure the motor is pushed as far as possible to the front in the slots provided. And then the final step is to assemble the pulley onto the shaft of the stepper motor. In the next step, we'll assemble the Y carriage to the big frame. What we'll need for that is the Y carriage assembly, the 2 M8 threaded rods, 10 M8 nuts, 2 M8 dome nuts, 12 M8 washers, and the assembly that we assembled previously for the front frame. The first thing that we'll do is we'll take the 2 threaded rods, we'll put on a M8 nut, we can screw it in a little bit like that, we can put on a washer, then we'll insert it through the holes provided. On the other side we'll put a washer, and we'll put the dome nut. The dome nut we can screw in till it bottoms out, and then we can screw the other nut back, and then we can just torque them with the spanner. When we're done with that, the assembly looks like this. Now the next step is to screw on 2 M8 nuts, one onto each rod, about up to halfway of the rod. Now the assembly looks like this, and we'll put a washer onto each rod, and we'll insert this so that this is on top. The linear rods will go into those holes. So this is the top of this assembly, and it will go through the holes provided into the big frame. When we insert the threaded rods into the big frame, we put on another washer and another nut on both sides. And once we've screwed it in a little bit, we can add on both sides again another nut, and then a washer. Once we've done that, we can further push the threaded rods through the plates at the back, and then we add the last 2 washers and nuts on at the back. Once we are this far, we can start to tighten the nuts towards the surfaces where they need to clamp. We can only put them more or less in place. It's not required at this stage to torque them, because we first need to assemble the Y carriage. Now we will take the Y carriage and insert it so that the wires and the belt goes to the back. We'll insert the linear rods into the holes provided in the flanges at the front and the back. Once we've inserted the linear rods, we'll push the front and the back towards each other, and then we'll start to tighten up all the M8 nuts. Make sure that you don't overstress the frame when you tighten these nuts. Once you are done with that and the frame is nice and stable, we can route the Y belt. So we'll take the belt and we'll route it around the motor, up here around the bearing at the top, and bring it back and secure it with a cable tie there. Once you've tied the Y belt to the other side as well and secure it with a cable tie, you can cut off the end of the cable tie, and now we can undo the motors of the Y-axis a little bit, push the motor down and tighten them again so that there's enough tension in the belt. When we are done with that, the assembly should look like this, with the motor nice and tight. There's some tension on the belt. So what we'll do now is we'll position the pulley on the motor shaft, that the belt is nice and aligned with the rest of the components, and then we'll tighten the grub screws on the shaft. Once you've done that, you can just check that your Y-axis can move freely from the back to the front. And as you do that, the motor should turn with it.